When you think of Tuscany, a few things come to mind. Mostly its famous rolling hills dotted with rustically beautiful cities. But lesser known is the Mascagni Terrace, one of the most elegant seaside promenades in Europe, and a place which comes with a story that, forgive the pun, had quite the checkered past. Come with me, my good friends, as we explore this magical place together. Once the site of a medieval fortress to the southern flank of the port city of Livorno, this site guarded against raiders and smugglers and formed part of a whole chain of watchtowers along the Tuscan coast, as I'll touch on shortly as we explore the ruins of Roman baths that are hidden just 15 minutes drive down the coastal highway. But these old seaborne threats subsided following the unification of Italy in the 1800s, and unlike these more remote watchtowers, the military fortress at Livorno was completely demolished to create a unique public space for the citizens of the city. You see, the city of Livorno was and still is made wealthy by its enormous port, now one of the largest in Europe, and was particularly reliant on trade with the British, thanks to the port enacting early free market policies in the 1700s. This contact with Britain and later the other great mercantile powers of Europe gave the city more of an international character than what you typically expect from Tuscan cities. And so it was devised that a grand terrace would be built from this wealth, with a total of 35,000 now antique checkered tiles. The initial section shown here was completed in the early 1900s, with the circular pergola being added in the 1930s to host live music. But this would be destroyed just a decade later, along with many of the other cultural gems of the city, by extensive Allied bombings of Livorno during the Second World War. Fortunately for us, this was to be rebuilt, along with a huge extension of the terrace following the war, using the crushed rubble of the devastated historic centre to cast the iconic black and white tiles. And so, while much of the old city of Livorno was left permanently scarred, the terrace would at least be rebuilt and developed yet further from the ashes of its near ruin. The Mascagni Terrace is therefore a place of beauty not only for being uniquely picturesque, but also as being a symbol of rebirth from the ravages of war, as well as being a symbol of historic pride in once being a city of such international importance. And personally, what I like to think this place shows best is how imposing a man-made environment can somehow enhance and complement the natural beauty of an area, with the characteristic rocky shoals of the central Tuscan coast still remaining as a central feature of the terrace's design. But as we fly away from civilization, it's time to get into your swimsuit as we dive into what are possibly the most unique set of plunge pools on Earth. If you've ever visited the remains of a Roman bath, you'll most likely have had both a barrier and a stern-looking guard preventing you from getting very close. Well then, my dear friends, let me introduce you to Le Vaschette, the gorgeous coastal Roman baths that are still in use today. Excuse the pun, and let's dive right in. This picturesque coastal road does little to indicate that you're driving through an ancient bathing area hidden on the slopes below. But the locals know that pulling up at certain points reveals some of the most incredible seaside bathing areas in the world. There are numerous ancient open-air sandstone quarries dotted along the coastal reefs of Tuscany, particularly just south of the modern city of Livorno. Some of them are right next to the sea or even below water level, while others are located further inland. And knowing the history of them helps us understand just how unique they are. This area is marked on the 4th century Roman map named the Tabula Peutingeriana, showing the ancient road network of the empire emanating from the city of Rome, effectively making it the oldest road map in history. And this particular spot, labelled ad piscinas, meaning to the seawater pools, suggests that by the late Roman period of the 300s AD, the old coastal quarries were at this point noteworthy for being used as public baths. But as I'll be exploring when we reach the nearby 3,000-year-old city of Populonia, The age of these man-made structures goes back even a millennia before the date of this Roman map, with some of the earliest coastal quarry shelves being dated to the Etruscan civilization, which was dominant in Tuscany long before the rise of Rome. But back to the particular baths, or Vaschette of Calafuria, which was the focus of my visit when I went to film there, we find a little further up the coast is a cave, Grotta del Boccale, famed locally today as one of the most beautiful diving areas in the Tuscan archipelago. Overlooking it stands Prada Castle, once a Medici fortress built in the 1500s to guard the coast, but its beauty meant that it quickly morphed into a private residence, and today it houses luxury apartments. But it's the numerous Medici watchtowers also seen here above these particular pools, which are yet another beautiful trait which define this area. The final contributor to this place is of course the beauty and the power of the Mediterranean Sea. And after millennia of seawater erosion, the stone interior of the pools are incredibly smooth to the touch, and the coastal swell provides a natural massage to those who immerse themselves. And with that, I'll leave you with my favorite shot from my day of filming to let you soak up in your very own moment in one of the Vaschette of Calafuria. For our next stop along Tuscany's coast, we're going to do something a little different and explore two places on our grand tour of Italy. One is an ancient beach town steeped in Italian history, culture, and cinema. The other is a new tropical-style beach that's the byproduct of things that are both great and terrible about the modern world. But what is it that connects these two wildly different places? Well, just a 3-minute journey by car separates the two. Well, that, and also the worst kept secret on the Tuscan Riviera. Welcome, good people, to the two beaches of Castiglioncello and Rosignano Solvay. We begin with the picturesque seaside town of Castiglioncello, a place instantly reminiscent of the famous cliffside coastlines of Amalfi or Cinque Terre. Well, this is very much Tuscany's version, and yes, these cliffs might not be quite as dramatic as some of the others that you might find in Italy, but the beach of Castiglioncello does have something that the likes of Positano could only dream of, the 4-letter word so sought after in these summer months: sand. You see, the towns of Cinque Terre and the Amalfi Coast play host to mostly shingle stone beaches, and in terms of beach quality are regarded to be inferior to many other places that can be found in Italy. Castiglioncello is perhaps the best example of this alternative, offering some of that early 20th century coastal Italian glamour, yet set around a sandy beach of the highest quality. Grand Art Nouveau villas stand proud upon the northern peninsula of the bay, while the Liberty-style town occupies the larger southern peninsula. The beach itself is reached by a windy staircase etched into the rock of the cliffside, giving way to the emerald shimmer of the sea and the golden glow of the sand. Even in winter, this place is simply magical, as you can see from the fact that I actually filmed this in mid-January. But there's more to Castiglioncello than its superficial beauty. Reference is made to this place having existed as an impoverished fishing village in the early 2nd century BC within Roman Etruria. It may have taken a couple millennia, but the town would enjoy a new lease of life in the mid-19th century, when a famous clique of early Impressionist artists, named the Macchiaioli, were drawn to the beauty of the area, establishing what became known as the School of Castiglioncello. And its good fortunes would later increase with the completion of a local train line in the early 20th century, which drew in the merchant class of nearby Livorno who sought a beachside getaway from the city, and bringing with them their taste in Italian Art Nouveau architecture, and thus developing the elegant town into much of what we see today. This aesthetic would actually spark yet another little renaissance only a generation or so later, as it attracted famous figures from the world of Italian cinema to holiday and reside in the town during the post-war period. And if you've ever felt like checking out classical Italian cinema, be sure to see Il Sorpasso, probably one of the most famous Italian movies from the 1960s, which itself is set in Castiglioncello. And although this place is less famous in the modern day, that's probably to its benefit. The architectural integrity of the town remains untarnished by large modern developments, but this couldn't contrast more greatly than it does with the neighbouring beach of Rosignano Solvay, made famous by its tropical white sand and turquoise water, which only exists because of a modern development. It's a place which evokes very strong emotions, either of love or hatred, and that's exactly why we need to explore it today. So let's get into it. The town of Rosignano began to develop in a similar way to its northern neighbour at the start of the 20th century, thanks to the train line making the area accessible to Tuscany's cities. But things took a very different turn almost immediately, with the arrival of two Belgian men named Ernest and Alfred Solvay, from whom the beach gets its modern name. The brothers established a washing soda factory just inland, making use of the abundant local limestone for its production. The factory not only brought wealth to the town, but also a rather strange terraforming of the local beach into something completely unique in Europe, a beach that you'd normally see in the Bahamas. Now yes, I know what you're thinking, and this is technically a process created by pollution. But it should be said from the outset that the materials which flow from the factory are entirely natural byproducts of pulverized limestone, sand, and clay, all of which have interacted with the beach in a seemingly harmless way. And so while it is technically heavily polluted, it is also incredibly clean and, according to regular studies, entirely safe, making it a place of very strange contradiction indeed. But despite this, the site remains controversial for some. Although there are no recognized health impacts created by the factory, it has still very much impacted visually upon the local landscape. As such, it can be argued that it's only owing to the good fortune that its natural byproducts create a superficially desirable coloring to the local beach that the pollution is permitted to continue. And certainly, so long as you're facing towards the sea whilst enjoying the beach, you truly are transported to a beautiful place in the tropics. Less so if you're facing inland and the imposing soda factory looms large over the horizon. But perhaps this contradiction means very little, as the factory does continue to give the local economy continued sustenance, and its pollution, strangely enough, makes the local beach a tourist hotspot, even more so in the modern age for Instagrammers who are more than happy to make sure that the factory is out of shot. And so Rosignano Solvay is indeed, in a certain way, really quite beautiful, just in a very different way to that of Castiglioncello. But speaking of beauty, just you wait until you see what I have in store for you next. Imagine a place hidden away in central Tuscany, which was once one of the most important cities in Europe, but today only has a population of 17. Welcome, dear friends, to Populonia. Let's dive into the fascinating story of this unique hidden gem, which can still be explored today. Populonia, as we now see it, is now a small portion of a walled acropolis which was once a part of a much larger ancient city. It covered the entirety of Monte Mascagni, with the slopes of the hill leading down to the Bay of Baretti, where the port once stood. The city was an Etruscan one, and was one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient world prior to the rise of Rome. Elaborate Etruscan burial sites and artifacts have been found at Populonia stretching back to the 900s BC, with the archaeological remains scattered all over this vast hilltop, suggesting this to have once been a densely populated urban center. Nature has since reclaimed most of this gleaming city that once stood here, but despite that, we know some fascinating details about the people that once thrived here. The city owed its wealth to being an industrial one. It smelted copper ore brought in from the local hills, and also imported iron ore from the island of Elba. As such, Populonia's refinement of these local raw materials made it a crucial supplier of the tools needed for the very best ancient technologies, whether it be for warfare, agriculture, or construction. So what could possibly go wrong? Let's dive into what befell this place that once had so much potential. It was around 600 BC that the city joined the Confederation of the Etruscan League of 12 cities, which banded together to exert cultural dominance over much of the Italian peninsula. It served as only one of two port cities within the league, highlighting its strategic and economic importance, especially in allowing it to connect to the other ancient civilizations of the Egyptians, Phoenicians, and the Greeks, scattered across the Mediterranean. Its gorgeous coastal position didn't come without its risks, however, as shown by the remains of a temple structure which was devastated around 400 BC by a conflict with the competing naval Greek city of Syracuse. Although eventually being absorbed into the Roman Empire in the 300s BC, the legacy of the Etruscans found at Populonia are known to have played a fundamental role in the original founding and development of ancient Rome. And if you'd like to hear more about that story, do check out my video on how Tuscany's hill towns changed the world. Disaster would befall the now Romanized city a couple centuries later, when its people chose to oppose a Roman dictator by the name of Sulla. The civil war that followed would see the city captured by the forces of Sulla, and him being a man not exactly known for behaving in moderation, plundered it to an extent that it could never fully recover. Populonia is mentioned in the Roman records for a final time almost half a millennia later, in the early 400s AD, when it is stated to have at that point been little more than just a ruin. The few inhabitants which remained fortified the settlement which we can still see today, holding out there during the subsequent collapse of the Roman Empire, before being forced to flee to the nearby island of Elba from the invading Germanic Lombard tribe, which razed it to the ground. Over the centuries, this final vestige of the collapsing Roman Empire would slowly be rebuilt, with this still inhabited part of Populonia being constructed directly upon Roman foundations. And today's tiny population resides there either as those who are descended from ancient local families, or as caretakers who care for the expansive park which covers the domain of the old Etruscan city. The origins of the name of the city are also a curious one. Originally, the city was named Fufluna, but owing to the letter F only being introduced within the Roman alphabet several centuries after the Etruscan and Roman civilizations came in contact with each other, the city was instead written down with a P instead of an F, leading to today's pronunciation of Populonia. And with that, I'll leave you with one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever filmed. One enjoyed by almost 3,000 years of Populonians.